Hi everyone, welcome to Mondays with Maja. It is number 17 today. Number 16, for some reason we had technological problems, and number 16, which was all about self-confidence part 1, didn't save on Instagram properly. Hi Elaine, hi Carolyn. And so that is why last week's Mondays with Maja is not on YouTube. We sort of lost it. It just didn't save properly and we lost it. So I am going to try to redo that one this week and then put it up on our YouTube channel. So hi everybody. Hi Mimi. Hi. Thank you for joining today. It was going to be quick because I know we all want to get our snacks out and our drinks out and start cheering for the Raptors. So I want to talk about a really great TED Talk that I listened to from public radio journalist Celeste Headlee. Has anybody listened to this TED Talk? It's called 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. It's by Celeste Headlee. It's got millions of views and it's really great. And then she ended up writing a book about it. And basically she talks about how we have lost the skill of chit chat. We have lost the skill of conversational competence. So conversational competence is really an overlooked skill because we spend so much of our times either hooked up to a computer or to our phone, and we're inundated with information at the same time that we don't really have an opportunity to work on our interpersonal skills and have confident conversations. I know many of us, when we enter a room with people that we don't know, or whether it's a dinner party or parent play dates kind of thing where you go and you pick up your kid and there's 8 other parents there, or birthday parties or office parties, and you don't really know how to make small talk, chit chat. So that's what she's talking about in this talk, about how that is a lost art. And she has 10 tips, which I'm going to go over for you right now. 10 tips on how you can be a more confident speaker and have better conversations with people. Okay, number 1, we basically all want conversations. You were just talking about this with somebody yesterday. Yes, it's a popular thing. I think we all sort of either notice when we've had a really awkward exchange with somebody, or conversely, when we've left a conversation with somebody and we feel heard, listened to, understood. We remember those people when we have those conversations where we feel connected. And so her TED Talk and her book, which is entitled We Need to Talk, is all about teaching people the skill, the lost art of conversational competence. Okay, so the number 1 rule is don't multitask. Don't multitask when you are conversing with somebody. So don't be looking at your phone. Have your phone away from you. Be in that moment. It's more than just having eye contact. It is consciously listening to them, being in that moment, not thinking about a previous conversation, maybe a previous fight that you had with somebody, not thinking about a future response or question that you want to ask them, is just being in that moment, being present with them. And so she made a really good point. She said, don't be half in or half out of a conversation. If you don't want to talk, get out of the conversation. Don't be half in or half out of the conversation. I have had so many conversations where I have been half in, and it probably just would have been better for both of us if I just took myself out of the conversation politely and moved on. Okay, number 2 is don't pontificate. Oh, Steve, do you want to make sure he doesn't start... Cooper, for some reason, if you can hear that squeaking, that's Cooper, who saves all his toys to squeak right every Monday at 8 o'clock. This is what he does. He doesn't chew them during the day. Right now, this is when he chews them. Okay, number 2 is don't pontificate. When you're having a conversation with somebody, it's not the opportunity for you to then lecture them on this grand idea that you have, or give them a lecture of all your opinions. So she says, if you want to do that, write a blog post, which I thought was funny. But conversations are meant to help us learn and to grow something and to grow, right? So you want to set aside your opinions And when you do that, people take notice and they're more likely to be open and vulnerable with us if they can sense that we have put away judgment, evaluation, and opinions, and we're just there trying to be present. Okay, so, and then she gave a really great quote from Bill Nye, the science guy, and she said, Bill Nye said, "Everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't." And then Celeste Headlee had a great quote, and she said, "Everyone is an expert in something." Meaning you can learn something from every single person you have a conversation with, whether you agree with their opinions or not, but you can learn something from them. So if you go into that conversation with that mindset, you're much more likely to learn something and have that person share and feel understood. Okay, so the first one was don't multitask. The second one was don't pontificate. And the third one is use open-ended questions. Don't use closed-ended questions where the person could respond with a one-word answer, yes, no. So she says to think like a journalist. Think what, where, when, why, and how. And start your questions off with one of those. And you're more likely to get an engaged response from them. That can then make it easier for the two of you to converse. Okay, so number 4 is go with the flow. And what she means with that is, as that person is talking, you may have tons of ideas and questions and everything that you want to say, but she says to let those ideas flow in one ear and out the other and just listen. Because so often when we talk with people, we just want to steer the conversation back to ourselves or share our own personal story. And she said it's a moment to listen to that person. So let the ideas flow. Number 5, if you don't know what to say, if you don't know something, say that. If you don't understand something, if you're not familiar with that term, if you've never heard of this, just say that. Just own it. You don't have to pretend to go along like you know exactly what that acronym is. I've been in so many conversations where somebody has used a very specific organizational lingo and has just assumed, hi Alessandra, and has just assumed that I know what it means. And I had no idea. And it just opens up for a better conversation if you can just own up and say, actually, I don't know what that is. Can you explain that? Okay, number 6 is don't equate your experience with their experience. Don't think that you know how they feel or you know what they're going through, because you don't. Because every single situation is individual. And just because you've gone through a hard time does not at all mean you know what their hard time is, right? Just because you're both parenting toddlers doesn't mean you know what that mama's going through, right? Just because you both have chronic health issues doesn't mean you know exactly what that person is going through. Just because you've both grieved for the death of a loved one doesn't mean you know what that person is going through. And I'm going to get into the number one thing you should not say to somebody in a conversation, which is, I know exactly how you feel. And I'll get into that at the end. So she says, don't compare what they're going through to what you have gone through, because it's never, ever the same, right? All of our experiences are very individual based, and you don't know the context or the history behind what they have gone through. And she had this great line in her TED Talk, and she said, conversations are not a promotional opportunity. Isn't that great? Conversations are not a promotional opportunity. Conversations are an opportunity to engage, to be heard, to be understood, to feel connected. Number 7, try not to repeat yourself. She said it's condescending and it's boring and it comes off as incredibly rude, and we all do it, and we do it a lot. So we make a point and then we remake that same point using different phrases or different words, but it's all the same point. And the other person is like, yeah, I get it. I know what you mean. I get it. So say it once. I got it. And I've been on both ends of that. I've tried to make my point multiple times. And as I was saying it, as I was repeating myself, I was like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Why am I repeating myself? And then I've also been on the receiving end where somebody has made a point and I'm like, yep, got it. And then they've repeated it like 3 different times using different lingo. And it does sort of make you feel dumb. You're like, why? Do they think I'm not smart enough to get this? So there's no need to repeat yourself. If you've made your point, you can move on. Number 8, she says, stay out of the weeds, meaning you don't have to remember the details of the author or the date of the article that you read or the study or what newspaper it came out of. She said, just talk about the greater context. What's the bigger point you're trying to make? Because people will not remember the small details. They're going to remember how you made them feel. They're going to remember the overall point of the story, not the small, minuscule details. And we have all listened to someone who got bogged down with the details. How many of us have listened to a conversation with somebody and they said, last Tuesday I was talking to Lucy. Oh no, wait, maybe it wasn't last Tuesday. It was last Monday. It could have been was it last Tuesday? I can't remember. And then they're like checking their calendar and you're like, oh my gosh, it's fine. I get it. You're telling a story. It doesn't matter if it was Monday or Tuesday, get on with it. Yes, so that's what she's talking about. This is how you can become a better conversationalist, is you don't have to worry about all the little details, that we can still understand the point of the story. Forget the details. Okay, number 9, listen, 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 listen. This is the most important skill and one that we don't often get the opportunity to practice and to get better at, which is the skill of listening. And why don't we listen? Because we'd much rather talk. We'd much rather steer the conversation back to us so that we are in control of the situation, so that we can steer it back to our comfort zone or our stories or our experiences or our pain, rather than talking and listening to what that person was talking about. And then she had this great quote from Stephen Covey, and she said, most of us don't listen with the intent to understand. Most of us listen with the intent to reply. How true is that? Most of us don't listen with the intent to understand. We listen with the intent to reply. So we're not in the moment, we're not listening, we're thinking of what we're going to say next, how we're going to jump in there with our story or a rebuttal, instead of just listening to try to understand where that person is coming from, or how their story or their pain or their experience developed. That was number 9. And number 10 is be brief. Be brief. Nobody likes a long-winded, overly detailed story. Be brief. And then she closed out her TED Talk with this really funny quote. And she said, a good conversation is like a mini skirt. It's short enough to retain interest, but long enough to cover the subject. So the top 10 ways to have a better conversation, as described by Celeste Headlee, is 1, don't multitask. 2, don't pontificate. 3, use open-ended questions. Start your questions with who, what, where, when, why. Number 4, go with the flow. Number 5, if you don't know something, if you don't understand something, just ask. Number 6, do not equate your experience with their experience, your pain with their pain. Number 7, try not to repeat yourself. Number 8, forget about the details. Number 9, listen, listen, listen. And number 10, be brief. So one way to have better conversations with people is to actually genuinely be interested in other people. And so when you talk with others, is to keep your mind open. And one of the best takeaways from her talk and her book was the idea of getting rid of the phrase, I know exactly how you feel. And this is the number one thing she argues we should never say to someone, is I know exactly how you feel. And so in her book, she gave the example of how she was with a coworker, and the coworker's father had died a few years earlier. But in this moment, her friend was distraught. And so she decided to tell her friend the story about how her own father died when she was a newborn, and how she never really had the chance to ever meet her father, and what that grieving process was like. So in her mind, she was trying to connect. And so her coworker turned around to her and said, well, guess what, Celeste? I guess you win the award. I guess you have a worse death story than I do. And she was like, that's not what I meant. Oh my goodness, I didn't mean that at all. So she wanted to show her friend that she wasn't alone, that many people have gone through the grieving process, that it does get better. But in that moment, what it felt like to her friend was the conversation got steered away from her pain and her experience and her story, and it got hijacked back to Celeste. And so sociologists call that conversational narcissism. So Charles Derber was a sociologist who came up with that, and it's called conversational narcissism. And it can often occur in very subtle and unconscious ways. People don't mean to be malicious in how they do that, or why they do that, why they hijack the conversation back to themselves. But this is when somebody's telling us something, relaying some type of a story, an experience, and we immediately go, oh my gosh, I know exactly how you mean. I know exactly how you feel because I went through this, because I did this. So she says or the sociologist Derber says there's two types of responses. There are support responses, where you give an answer that supports the story, that supports the other person talking, or there's what we call the shift response. So that is when you are shifting attention back to yourself. You're shifting the story back to yourself. So I'll give you an example. So your friend Susan says to you, oh my gosh, I'm fighting with my husband. He's driving me nuts. And then I respond and I say, oh my gosh, same here. All Steve and I do is fight. Do you know what Steve said to me yesterday? And then I start talking about what Steve did. So I've just hijacked the conversation and turned it back to me and my fights. That's a shift response. So a supportive response would be something like your friend Susan saying, oh my gosh, I'm fighting with my husband. He's driving me nuts. And you respond, why? What's going on? Why? What's happening? Tell me what's going on. So you answer back with one of those who, what, where, when, why questions, and you're engaging her to tell me more. So you are supporting her story. You're giving her room to open up, be vulnerable, and tell you more. So a supportive response encourages the other person to keep talking, lets the other person know that you're listening, that you're there, that you're interested, that you want to know more. It lets that person know that you are present, you are mindful, and it helps you initiate more questions. And it also lets people know that they are heard. They feel a connection. And so her book and her TED Talk is all about trying to get more reciprocity, more back and forth in conversations. And that when one person is sharing their joy or their pain or their experience, it doesn't give us the right to hijack it and then immediately try to trump their joy or trump their pain. So it's a really great TED Talk if you haven't had the chance to listen to it. It's called 10 Ways to Have Better Conversations by Celeste Headlee. And her book, if you want to read that, is called, let me just make sure I get the title for you. We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. We need to talk, how to have conversations that matter. And the number one response you should never say to somebody is, I know exactly how you feel. And that's it. That's it for tonight. See, I told you it was going to be a short one. I really tried to keep it short because the Raptors Game 5 pregame is going on right now. So get your snacks out. I'm going to go watch the game myself. Go Raptors! Thank you, everybody. And hopefully we save this properly. And we'll put it up on YouTube hopefully tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Bye. You can...